So far, we have been focusing on the various functionalities that are available within Concordance's database structure. And while that is important, since most of the time the tasks that we need to be completed will be within Concordance, such as searching, reviewing, tagging, etc., we should now turn our attention to viewing actual documents within Opticon. The document text information and field information, or metadata, that we have been looking at within Concordance are extracted out of an actual file, be it scanned paper document or an electronic file. Opticon allows you to be able to view the TIFF image as it was originally intended. If the document was originally a piece of paper, it was likely scanned into TIFF, or if the original file was electronic, it likely would have been converted into a TIFF file. We'll discuss reviewing and tagging actual electronic documents in a later lesson. Right now, let's focus on the Opticon image viewer. And tagging and reviewing of documents will likely be more difficult unless the original TIFF file can be seen. Otherwise, a jumbled group of text, as we get here in the OCR field, would be very difficult to read and to review. Fortunately, Opticon is a very simple program to use as an image viewer. Let's go ahead and launch the application by clicking on the camera button. As you can see, this image is the actual document that this database record here in Concordance represents. The text information, the file type, and base numbers are identical. Activating the camera button called up the corresponding image within Opticon. We'll delve deeper into what actually happens when this camera button is clicked and how the images are linked to Concordance in the next lesson when we discuss building the database from scratch. But for right now, we'll just look at the basic functions of Opticon as a TIFF viewer. Looking at the Opticon image, we can see that there are 3 rows of icons, which are very typical of most TIFF viewers. At the top is a row of icons for manipulating the image. On the left-hand side, vertically, are icons that allow for various annotations to be placed directly on the TIFF image. And at the bottom of the screen are some basic navigation functions. These 3 rows of icons can be moved about the screen simply by hovering the mouse over the beginning of the icon rows. I can hold down my left mouse button to drag them to any location on the screen, either to the left, to the right, the bottom of the screen, or even to the top of the screen. The default is a top row, left vertical row, and bottom row display. But if you prefer, you can move all 3 rows of icons into one single area. Personally, I find the default setting to be very convenient. Let's start by taking a look at the top row of icons. The first icon is the Open button. Now, while Opticon mainly serves as an image viewer for Concordance, you can use it basically as a sole image viewer. By clicking on this Opticon button, I can browse for an image file anywhere on my computer and pull it up for viewing. As you can see from this drop-down list, you can view not just TIFF images, but JPEGs, GIF files, BMP files, etc. If your computer is for some reason lacking an image viewer, Opticon can actually be a very good substitute. Now next to that is the Print button. This Print button will allow you to print the actual TIFF file, either the entire document, one page of the document, or you can even print all the documents in the entire database. When I click on this Print button, I get another menu with several other options available. The first Print tab allows me to choose if I want to print the entire image that I'm looking at or just a portion of the image. Meaning if I had zoomed into a particular section of the TIFF file, only that particular portion will be printed. I can also type in a page range to be printed if this document had multiple pages. Or I can choose to print a document range also by placing some numbers within these boxes here. Notice that when I select the document range option, the page count button becomes available. This option is a quick way for me to get a page count prior to printing out the document. I can leave it set on the document range of 1 to 25 to get a total page count for the entire database. When the page count is done, the total number appears here in this box. If I want a page count for just half the documents, say maybe 1 to 15, all I have to do is change the numbers here and get a total page count for the first 15 documents. Now, if there's not a range of documents you want to print, but rather a list of specific documents, this list option below will allow you to bring in a text file with the list. Simply click on this list button, then browse to the location of your text file with the list of document numbers that you want to print. Next, the Retrieve and Save option on the right-hand side allows you to save the settings of your print screen as the default, or save it as a settings file that can be opened by everyone else on your team so that everyone is printing documents in the same format. That format will include the settings made in the header and footer, as well as any bait stamping options. It's a simple and clean way to make sure that your printouts are done in a consistent manner by everyone on the review team. And of course, also you have your usual print options related to the number of copies and whether or not you want to collate the printed pages. The next tab over allows you to decide what information should be stamped onto the TIFF image, if anything. As you can see, there are 4 location boxes from which you can choose a field of information to be stamped. Although you can see all the fields available, only the first line of text from each field will be shown on this stamp, which is actually an improvement over previous versions. Now, whereas in older versions of Concordance we can jam about 60 characters into each spot, Concordance 2007 is only limited by the length of your page. In addition to the fields within the database, you can also stamp the current date time, the image key, or the page number, and etc. So there are plenty of choices if you want to stamp various pieces of information onto the image that you're printing. And if you don't want to use any current field information, you can also simply type in any text into the boxes here. And by checking off this auto increment box, Opticon will also automatically add in a 3-digit number to your text that you've inputted. If you type in a number, the auto increment will automatically increase the number on each new page by 1. Meaning this first page would be stamped with 1, 2, 3, 4. The next page would be stamped with 1, 2, 3, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, and so on, thereby giving you something similar to a Bates number without actually providing a Bates scheme. The next tab is the Options tab. In this area, you'll find a few more useful functions. The first is this red lines box. Here you can select whether or not specific annotations made on the TIFF image should be printed. That is, if a redaction or a highlight was made on the TIFF image, should it be printed when somebody hit the print button? Underneath that is a checkbox which you can mark to define whether or not any attached notes should be printed. Again, the notes are the same things that we've discussed in the tagging section. To the right of the red lines box are 2 other options. The first allows you to choose whether or not a slip sheet should be placed in between documents if you're going to print out multiple documents. You can choose a different source for the slip sheets. That way the second source can contain a different color paper for easy identification. And you can also type in some text to be placed on the slip sheet, maybe something along the lines of new document. The box right underneath the separated sheet option is the error log. As a default, the options is checked off. That means that if the printing encounters any problems, the errors will be placed into a log instead of interrupting your printing with a message box. I've personally found that it's generally a good idea to use this option, especially for large print jobs. The last tab is the Print Setup tab, which is a similar tab to most other software applications. It identifies your basic print options like choosing your desired printer, paper size, source, and orientation. This entire print menu here, while being activated by the print button, can also be accessed by going to File, Print. Now next to the print icon is the Mark button. This button allows you to copy a portion of the TIFF image and paste it into another location or software. Basically, it's a cut and paste option. All you have to do is select it, then using your mouse and dragging the left mouse button over the area you want to copy. Once you have the area selected, simply go to Edit Copy, or you can also press the Ctrl and C keys at the same time. The portion of the image highlighted will now be copied onto your computer clipboard, and you can paste it into another software by using Ctrl-V command for paste. For instance, I'll go ahead and open up the bitmap viewer on Windows and paste it here. And now you see a copied portion of what was pasted out of Opticon. Besides copying and pasting, you can also cut information from the TIFF image. If I select another portion, I can go to Edit, Cut, or again just use Ctrl X to remove it from the TIFF image. As you can see, the cut portion is gone and I'm left with a blank rectangular area. In reality though, all the program is doing is just placing a blank white box over the area. So if I wanted to undo my cut, I just have to right click over the cut area and select Delete the box. Next to the Mark button is the Mark Zoom. This button basically allows you to zoom into a specific area by highlighting the area just as we did with the Mark button. I just select it, then select an area on the screen, again by holding down my left mouse button and dragging it. And as you can see, the screen zooms to that particular section. Now, besides this Mark Zoom, there are several other zoom options available within Opticon. The next button here is the magnifying glass. That is, when I activate it, my mouse becomes a magnifier. And as you can see, anywhere I now move my mouse, the image is enlarged. Another way to magnify the image is with the next button. This magnifier brings up a new window. The window allows me to change my magnification. Now from this point on, any location that I hover my mouse over, the corresponding area is magnified into this new screen. The next button is the pan button, which is this icon here that looks like a hand. Basically, allows you to move the document around within the Opticon window. So for instance, if I zoom close to the image, I can now use the pan button to shift the image about a bit to get a better view of certain areas. After this pan button are two buttons which are repetitive of the Mark button here that we looked at a moment ago. This clipboard button is a shortcut to the copy process. Once I activate it, my mouse becomes a clipboard icon, and any area that I select automatically gets copied and can be pasted into another application like Bitmap. I don't have to press Ctrl C this time because the copying is automatically done for me. And the little scissor icon is the cut button. Again, this repetitive of the Mark button that we saw earlier. After I highlight an area, I can click on it and it will automatically be cut off of my TIFF image. And this last button, which is a question mark, actually launches the Concordance help menu. So there we have the main functions of the top list of icons. Pretty basic. Now let's take a look at the list of functions to the left of the screen, which are the annotation icons. This list of icons on the left, these annotation tools, are pretty straightforward. This highlighting button will highlight the document, and the remaining icons here are adding squares, circles, and a filled circle. The A button allows the addition of text directly onto the image, and the line puts a line directly on the image. This sticky note button allows you to do just that, stick a note onto the page. One thing I do want to mention about these annotation buttons is that you can bring up further options by right-clicking over them. This allows you to change the annotation's color, move it around on the page, or delete it entirely. These right-click options of moving and resizing annotations are also available as buttons here. This icon that looks like a 4-arrow cross is the Move button, and the one below it is the Resize button. When I click on the Move button, I can now click on any of these annotations and move them around on the TIFF image. The Resize button works in the same fashion. Now let me turn your attention back to this one annotation that I skipped over, which is the Redaction button. When I activate it, my mouse turns into a pen shape which I can use to redact areas of the image. As you can see, Concordance uses a dotted box with crossed lines as redactions. What's more, if I right-click over the redaction, I can actually specify the redaction text to be used. So, each time I redact an area, the text is automatically applied as well. I can change the redaction text defaults by going into the Edit Redaction Text option. Here, I can just type in a new text. Maybe instead of redacted, I can put privileged, and also decide on the font that I want to use. Now personally, I found this redaction tool to be very useful, but every once in a while I do run up against a project that does not want this dotted line look. In those cases, we can make use of the highlighter tool. Note that if I change the highlighter tool's color to black or white, it becomes a very suitable redaction tool. For instance, if I take it into this black color and redact the text, it's completely hidden. And if you want, you can add the word redact directly onto the highlight tool. Obviously, the tool of choice for redaction will depend on your particular case. Now the last icon on this menu bar is the icon that looks like a pair of binoculars. It's the search button. It basically allows you to search for specific annotations or text that have been made onto the TIFF images. It's a quick and simple search for anything that might have been added to the TIFF images themselves. Okay, with that, let's turn our attention to the final bar of icons on the image viewer. This last row of icons down on the bottom basically has to do with navigation. These buttons here lets you flip through the images on the page-by-page level. These next buttons let you jump to the first page and the last page. The next two smaller arrow keys are flipping through images on a document level. Now one thing you'll want to be careful of when jumping through documents is that the concordance record you're looking at might not be in sync. Most of the earlier version of Concordance have the slight bug of being missynced between images and database records. Now the current releases of Concordance and Opticon have the issue fixed so that flipping through the documents will automatically sync between Opticon and Concordance, but it may not in your particular case, so this is something you want to keep an eye out for. The next few buttons are for zooming purposes. The minus symbol zooms out at a small increment, and the plus symbol zooms in. The purple arrow buttons fits the TIFF image to the screen either by width or by height. And the last button rotates the image. Again, these are fairly standard for image viewing options. One thing I do want to mention about these zoom options here on the bottom row, just like within Concordance itself, they are activated by shortcut keys. So I can zoom in by clicking on these buttons, or I can also use the plus or minus key on my keyboard. I can fit to height and fit to width with these option buttons down at the bottom, or I can simply hit the H key for fit to height and W for fit to width. You can find these shortcut keys among others listed under the View menu here. And there you have the general functions of annotations and manipulating TIFF images within Opticon. The only other functions to talk about within the Opticon environment is the actual production of the documents and also working with the image space or the dir file. These are features we will go into during the lesson on how to export data from Concordance.